I used to think my husband was the weak one. Turns out, I was the one who couldn't handle the truth. My name is Wanda, and I'm writing this because, well, I don't even know why anymore. Maybe it's a form of penance. Maybe I'm hoping that by putting it all down, by confessing to the void of the internet, I can finally start to breathe again. Or maybe I just want someone, anyone, to know the colossal, life-altering mistake I made. The mistake that cost me everything. James. My James. For 7 years, he was my rock, my anchor in the chaotic sea of my life. Married for 4 of those years, and I genuinely believed we were unbreakable. He was the quiet one, the calm in my storm. He'd listen to my rants, absorb my frustrations, and never ever raise his voice. I saw it as him being laid back, easygoing. I saw it as him being pliable. God, that word makes me sick now, but it's the truth. I thought I could push, and he'd just bend, always accommodating, always forgiving, and I pushed. Lord, did I push. I took his gentle nature, his quiet strength, and twisted it in my mind into weakness. And I exploited it, relentlessly. I remember once, early in our marriage, maybe 6 months in, we had this awful fight. I can't even remember what started it. Something dumb like the wrong groceries or him forgetting to text back. But at the time, it felt massive. I was livid, storming around the apartment like a whirlwind, raising my voice, throwing sarcasm like daggers. I wanted him to feel small, to know I was right. And James? He just stood there. His arms hung at his sides, his face pale, and his eyes had this faraway look I didn't understand back then. It wasn't anger. It was something heavier, like disappointment or quiet heartbreak. He tried to speak. I remember that. He started with, "Wanda, I just think..." But I cut him off before he could finish. Louder, sharper. I said something like, "You think? Since when does that help us?" And that landed. I saw his shoulders tense, then drop, like someone had let the air out of him. He didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He just stared at the wall for a moment and then said, almost whispering, "Okay, Wanda, you're right." And I felt it. That rush. That stupid, childish high of winning. I had crushed his argument. I had crushed him. I turned away feeling victorious. And he walked into the bedroom, closed the door, and stayed silent the rest of the night. But here's the twist I never admitted out loud until now. The next morning, I found him sitting in the living room, holding a tiny, beat-up paperback. I asked what it was, and he said, "Just something I reread when I feel like I'm disappearing." It was The Little Prince, a book about loneliness, about being invisible in a world that doesn't listen. And I laughed. I actually laughed. I told him he was too sensitive. I didn't know it then, but I think that was the first time he truly started to leave me. Not physically, but emotionally. I won the fight, yes. But I started losing him. The night it all imploded, the night my carefully constructed delusion shattered into a million pieces, was at his friend Mike's house party. It was supposed to be a fun night. Casual drinks, music, catching up with old friends. James hated big social gatherings. He was an introvert, happiest with a book or a quiet evening at home. But he went. For me. Because I loved them. I thrived on the attention, the chatter, the energy of a crowd. He knew that, so he'd put on a smile, hold my hand, and endure. I never truly appreciated what that cost him. The evening started well enough. I was in my element, wine in hand, laughing with Mike's wife, Lisa, and a few other women. The conversation, as it often does at these things, veered towards relationships. Then someone, I don't even remember who, asked this incredibly dumb cliché question. "So, ladies, if something went down, like a dangerous situation, do you think your man could protect you?" A wave of performative bravado washed over the group. Some women gushed about their gym rat husbands, others about their partner's intimidating presence. And then all eyes turned to me. I didn't even pause, Didn't think for a single second. The words just tumbled out of my mouth, wrapped in a dismissive laugh. James? Oh, please. If we got jumped in an alley, I'd probably have to protect him. The room exploded in laughter. That sharp, chaotic kind of laughter that fills every corner, loud and unforgiving. And God help me, I basked in it. I smiled, wide and smug, like some twisted comedian basking in the glow of her finest joke. Just a joke, I told myself. Harmless, teasing, my signature wit. Everyone loved it. And James? James had always been an easy target. My easy target. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't realize until the damage was done, was that James had just walked in. He'd come to find me, maybe to offer me his coat, maybe just to ask if I was okay. And instead, he heard me. Every word, every punchline at his expense. I caught a glimpse of him through the flicker of candlelight and wine glasses. His face, still unreadable, but not neutral. There was a split-second flicker, like a crack in glass. Pain, or maybe betrayal. But it vanished so fast, I could almost pretend I imagined it. He didn't confront me. He didn't storm out or raise his voice. He just grabbed a beer, sat at the edge of the group, and watched me like I was someone he didn't recognize anymore. The chill in the air wasn't from the open window. It was from him. The silence of a man unraveling in real time. Still, I kept going. I doubled down, tossed in another jab about his baby-soft hands and how he once called me from the kitchen because the corkscrew looked complicated, and they laughed again, louder. But here's what I never forgot. When I sat beside him later, drunk on attention, I noticed something strange. His wedding ring was gone, quietly slipped off. A tiny, final act of defiance I was too blind to see for what it was. I mean, look at him, I remember saying later, nudging Lisa conspiratorially, my voice carrying across the patio. He struggles to open a pickle jar sometimes. What's he going to do in a fight? Throw his accounting degree at someone? More laughter. I glanced at James. He smiled. A small, tight-lipped curve of his mouth that didn't reach his eyes. That should have been my cue. That fake smile should have screamed danger. But I was deaf to it. He'll get over it, I thought. He always does. When the party finally wound down, James didn't wait for me. He just grabbed his coat, mumbled a quick goodbye to Mike, and walked out to the car without a word. I watched him go, a flicker of annoyance rising in me. I scoffed, rolled my eyes dramatically for Lisa's benefit. Guess someone's in their feelings tonight, I said, trying to make light of it, to regain control of the narrative. Lisa gave me a look then, a strange, appraising look. One of those, you might have taken it too far looks. I brushed it off. He'd be fine. He always was. Right? Wrong. So wrong. The car ride home was suffocatingly silent, the kind of silence that presses in on you, heavy and charged. I tried to break it, chattering about the party, about Lisa's new haircut, anything to fill the void. James just nodded, or offered one-word answers, his eyes fixed on the road, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I let out an exasperated sigh. Oh my God, James! Are you seriously mad about that joke? I was kidding. He gripped the steering wheel even tighter. His voice, when he finally spoke, was terrifyingly calm. Too calm. It wasn't the James I knew. It's not just the joke, Wanda, he said, his gaze still fixed ahead. It's the way you talk about me. Like I'm some useless joke of a man. Do you even respect me at all? I blinked, genuinely caught off guard. This wasn't the script. He was supposed to laugh it off, maybe pout for a bit, and then I'd kiss him and everything would be fine. Of course I do, babe, I stammered, trying for a reassuring tone. Come on, we tease each other all the time. You know I love you. He shook his head slowly. No, Wanda, he said, his voice still quiet, but with an edge of steel I'd never heard before. You tease me. I just take it. That silence that followed his words, it hit me like a physical blow. It was a truth I'd never allowed myself to see, and now it was laid bare, raw, and undeniable. I didn't know what to say, so I did what I always did when I felt cornered or uncomfortable. I laughed. A short, awkward, defensive laugh. "You're being dramatic," I said, trying to regain my footing. "You're seriously mad because I made a joke in front of Mike and Lisa?" "No," he said, pulling into our driveway. He turned off the engine, and the silence in the car became even more oppressive. He finally looked at me, and his eyes, they were empty, devoid of the warmth, the love, the patience I'd taken for granted for so long. "I'm mad because it's not just a joke. It's who you are. You put me down in front of people all the time. You belittle me, you undermine me, and I'm done pretending it doesn't bother me." Before I could even process his words, before I could formulate a defense or an apology or anything, he got out of the car, walked into the house, and shut the door behind him. The sound of that click echoed in the sudden stillness, a final, definitive punctuation mark. The next morning, I woke up expecting things to be, if not normal, then at least on the path to normal. I expected the usual routine. I'd make coffee, he'd be a little quiet, I'd apologize half-heartedly, he'd sigh, and we'd move on. He always moved on. But this time was different. He wasn't just cold. He was absent. He was physically there, sitting across the kitchen table, but his eyes were distant, like he was a million miles away. "Are you seriously still mad?" I scoffed, pouring myself a coffee, my voice laced with an impatience I couldn't quite conceal. I was still clinging to the belief that this was just another one of his moods, something I could jolly him out of. He looked at me then, a long, steady gaze that made my stomach clench. "I don't think this is working anymore," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. My heart stuttered. "What? Us? You mean us?" The coffee cup clattered in my hand. He set his own coffee down, his movements deliberate, precise. "I don't think I want to do this anymore, Wanda." I laughed. I actually laughed. A hysterical, disbelieving sound that echoed strangely in our sunny kitchen. "Oh, come on, James. You're not leaving me over a joke." "It's not just a joke," he repeated, his voice unwavering. "It's years of jokes, Wanda. Years of me feeling like less of a man around you. Years of you making me the punchline over and over again. And last night was it for me. The final straw." I crossed my arms, a wave of defensiveness washing over me. How dare he, after everything I'd put up with, his quietness, his lack of ambition, as I saw it then. "So what? You're just going to throw away 7 years? Our marriage? Just like that?" He nodded, his eyes holding mine. Then he stood up. "Yeah, Wanda, I am." I stared at him, my mind reeling. I was waiting for the punchline, waiting for him to crack a smile to say, "Gotcha." Waiting for him to get over it, like he always did. But his face remained impassive, resolute. He grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair, picked up his car keys from the counter. He walked to the door. "James, don't be ridiculous," I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. Panic was starting to claw its way up my throat. "We can talk about this. We can fix this." He paused at the door, his back to me. He let out a long, slow sigh, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of years of unspoken pain. "No, Wanda," he said, his voice tired. "You talk. I listen. I've been listening for 7 years, and I finally realized something last night." He turned slightly, and his eyes, for the first time, showed a flicker of something raw. Not anger, but a deep, profound sorrow. I deserve better. And with that, he walked out. Just like that. The door clicked shut behind him, a sound far more final than the one in the car the night before. This time it felt like the sound of my world ending. Days turned into weeks. At first I was in denial, complete, stubborn denial. He was just cooling off, I told myself. He needed some space. He'd come back. He had to come back. I called him, texted him relentlessly. My calls went straight to voicemail. My texts were met with a deafening silence, those 2 blue ticks on WhatsApp staring back at me like a cruel taunt, showing they were delivered but never read. I even went to his office, a desperate, humiliating move. His assistant, a kind-faced woman named Sarah who always seemed to like me, looked at me with pity in her eyes and politely informed me that Mr. Henderson had left early for the day. He was shutting me out, systematically, thoroughly. I called Lisa, expecting her to reassure me, to tell me James was just being dramatic and he'd come crawling back. But she didn't. There was a long hesitation on her end of the line before she spoke, her voice softer, more cautious than usual. "Honestly, Wanda," she said, "I think he's done. I think he means it this time." I scoffed, a hollow, brittle sound. "Oh, please, Lisa. He just needs time. He's probably just staying at Mike's to teach me a lesson." "No, Wanda," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "I don't think this is about teaching you a lesson. I think he needed a wake-up call, and I think last night. I think that joke was it for him, or rather, the final it." She paused, then added something that hit me harder than I expected. "And Wanda, about the laughter at the party, people weren't laughing because your joke was funny. They were laughing because it was uncomfortable, because you were being cruel, and no one knew what else to do." Uncomfortable laughter. Cruel. The words echoed in my head, chipping away at the fortress of my denial. I'd always prided myself on my humor, my ability to make people laugh. Had I been so blind, so tone-deaf to the true nature of my jokes? It took another week, a long, agonizing week spent staring at the 4 walls of our increasingly empty-feeling apartment, for the reality to finally, brutally sink in. James wasn't coming back. He was gone. And it was my fault. Entirely my fault. The realization didn't come in a sudden flash of insight. It was a slow, agonizing crawl through a swamp of regret and self-loathing. I started replaying scenes from our relationship, not just the party, but countless other moments. Moments where I'd belittled him, dismissed his feelings, made him the butt of my jokes in front of friends, family, even strangers. I remembered our wedding, the speeches, the clinking of glasses, the flickering candlelight, the way his eyes never left mine. God, even then, he was so present. And then there was my moment, my toast, my time to shine. I'd decided to be funny. I told the story of how, on our 3rd date, we watched The Notebook, and James, sweet, awkward James, teared up during the final scene. I'd mimicked his face, squinting and sniffling in mock drama, and delivered the punchline. That's when I knew I'd married a sensitive soul, one I'd need to toughen up. There was laughter, polite, uncomfortable, not the roar I'd expected. I noticed it even then, but I pushed through it, mistaking their unease for surprise at my sharp humor. James had gone bright red, not a blush, a flush. His smile was pulled too tight, barely holding. But under the table, he'd still reached for my hand and whispered, "I love you." And I didn't even look at him. I just patted his hand like a dog who'd done a trick and raised my glass to the crowd, basking in what I thought was charm, not realizing I'd just drawn blood. The memory now didn't feel funny. It felt vile. It wasn't just the one time. That was the blueprint. I'd built our entire dynamic around casual ridicule, under the guise of just teasing. Birthdays, work parties, brunches, anytime there was an audience, James became my punchline. And each time, he took it quietly. Every time, he forgave me. But looking back, I realized, I don't think he ever laughed. Not once. How had I become that person? The kind of person who derives pleasure from someone else's pain, especially the pain of the person I claim to love most in the world. Desperate for answers, for some way to understand the chasm that had opened up in my life, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I called Emma, James's older sister. Emma was a therapist. She and I had always had a cordial, if somewhat distant, relationship. I'd always found her a bit too analytical, a bit too perceptive. Now, I craved that perception. She agreed to meet me for coffee. I was a wreck. I probably looked like I'd been dragged through a hedge backwards and cried for a week straight, which wasn't far from the truth. Emma, on the other hand, was her usual composed self. She listened patiently as I stumbled through my story, my apologies, my desperate pleas for her to tell me what to do, how to fix it. When I finally ran out of words, she looked at me. Her expression a mixture of sadness and something else I couldn't quite decipher. Maybe pity? Maybe disappointment. "Wanda," she began, her voice calm and measured. "James has been hurting for a very, very long time. That joke at the party, it wasn't the cause of this. It was the detonator. The final, unbearable insult on top of years of accumulated pain." I flinched. "Years?" Emma nodded. "Years. He loved you, Wanda. He loved you so much he tried to absorb it all. He tried to be the bigger person, to tell himself your words didn't matter, that you didn't mean them. But they did matter. They chipped away at him, piece by piece. He felt emasculated, disrespected, unloved for who he truly was. Then she told me something that shattered the last vestiges of my self-deception. Something that finally made me understand the true depth of the wound I'd inflicted. "Do you know why that weakness joke, that whole he can't protect you narrative you spun, hit him so hard, Wanda?" she asked, her voice softening slightly. I shook my head, tears welling up in my eyes again. "When James was a kid," Emma continued, her gaze distant, "he was bullied, relentlessly, for years. He was a small, quiet boy, more interested in books and art than sports. And the other kids, they called him weak. They tormented him, physically and emotionally. It left deep scars, Wanda. Scars he spent years trying to heal. He built himself up, found his own kind of strength, his kindness, his loyalty, his intellect. But that word, weak, it was a trigger, a direct hit to his oldest, most painful wound." My breath hitched. I felt a cold dread seep into my bones. I'd known James had a quiet childhood, but he'd never talked about bullying. And I, in my arrogant self-absorption, had never bothered to ask, to truly know him. I just assumed. Assumed he was fine, that his past didn't matter. "He never told me," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "He doesn't like to talk about it," Emma said. "He felt ashamed. And maybe he didn't feel safe enough with you to share that vulnerability. You have to understand, Wanda, your jokes weren't just jokes to him. They were a confirmation of his deepest fears, the ones he'd fought his whole life to overcome. And they were coming from the one person who was supposed to be his safe harbor, his biggest champion." Emma's words were like a scalpel, expertly dissecting my soul, laying bare all my ugliness. She wasn't accusatory, not really. She was just stating facts, James's facts, his truth. And it was a truth I could no longer deny. "He's not weak, Wanda," Emma said, her voice firm but gentle. "It takes incredible strength to endure what he endured, both as a child and in his marriage to you. And it took incredible strength for him to finally walk away, to choose himself, his own well-being, over a relationship that was slowly destroying him. I left that coffee shop a changed woman. The anger, the denial, the defensiveness. It was all gone, replaced by a crushing weight of guilt and a profound, aching sadness. I finally saw James clearly, not as the weak, pliable man I'd painted him to be in my mind, but as a man of quiet courage, immense patience, and deep sensitivity. A man I had systematically broken down with my careless words and selfish actions. The apartment didn't just feel empty. It felt hollowed out, like someone had taken a vacuum to our life and sucked the soul from every corner. His side of the closet stood open, ghost-like. Hangers swayed gently, as if still remembering the weight of his shirts. The shelf where his books once sat now held only dust outlines, faint rectangles where titles like Man's Search for Meaning and Into the Wild used to be. I remember laughing at him for reading those, calling them wannabe deep guy books. Now I ran my fingers over the dust outlines like they were sacred etchings on a tombstone. The little things were gone too. The carved wooden fox he bought on our trip to Vermont. The silly mug that said, "World's okayest husband." Even the note he once left me, handwritten on the back of a receipt that said, "Your smile fixes my worst days." I'd tucked it into a drawer and forgotten it. Now the drawer was empty, and in the silence that followed, I heard something terrifying. Myself. Echoes of my sarcasm bouncing off the walls. The sound of my voice, always louder, always sharper, it haunted the rooms like a cruel specter. I curled into the couch, knees to chest, scrolling through photos like a woman trying to remember what light looked like. There we were, beach sunsets, snowy cabins, birthdays, and burnt dinners. His smile, every single time, was aimed at me. And me? I was looking at the camera, always performing, always centered. The love was in his eyes. The ego was in mine. Then I opened a video I hadn't seen in years. He was filming me on the balcony, golden hour softening everything. I was laughing about something, wine in hand. Behind the camera, he whispered, barely audible, "God, I love her." I hadn't heard it then. I hadn't even noticed he said it. And here's the spiking truth that gutted me. It wasn't that he stopped loving me. It's that I never made room to love him back. Not properly. Not the way he deserved. It's been months now. I'm in therapy, trying to understand myself, to unravel the tangled mess of insecurities and ego that led me to treat James so poorly. Trying to become a better person. Not for him, not anymore. It's too late for that. But for myself. So that I never, ever cause another human being the kind of pain I caused James. I don't know where he is now. Emma keeps his confidence, as she should. I hope he's happy. I hope he's found peace. I hope he's found someone who sees his strength, who cherishes his gentle heart, who loves him the way he deserves to be loved. As for me, I'm still picking up the pieces of the life I shattered. I'm learning to live with the consequences of my actions. I'm learning that some mistakes can't be undone. Some apologies will never be heard. And some forgiveness you have to find within yourself. Because the person you hurt is no longer there to grant it. The man I once called weak is now the strongest memory I have. And I'm the punchline I can't laugh at anymore.